Most men today say that they can't find a godly wife, but they're looking in all the wrong harvest fields. See, you don't find a Proverbs 31 woman in a Proverbs 7 environment. You don't find Ruth in the club, you found her in the field serving. And when it comes to finding a godly wife, we have to be careful that we look in the right places. Rather than wasting your time and effort trying to find her in a place that she cannot be found, why don't you try looking in some places where she can be found? We're going to talk about that here today on this episode. Stay tuned. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 22 says, "Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favor of the Lord." And see, the problem that we find in today's society is that many men have great passions, but they have the wrong pursuits, and they go to the wrong places. See, there's nothing wrong with wanting to find a godly wife, but if you don't do it the right way, then you're not going to have the same outcome and rewards. When it comes to finding a godly wife, it's important that we search for her in the same places that she can be found, or else you're going to have that problem on your hands for the rest of your life, trying to find a godly wife in a place where she's not. And honestly, the problem isn't necessarily a lack of godly women, it's a lack of godly places where they can be found. And I want to encourage you here today to, if you're not in a place where she can be found, go to one. But more importantly than that, make sure your relationship with God is right first before you start pursuing women. And that's an episode for another time. We won't cover that here today. On this one, we're going to talk about those places where she can be found. I think it's important, though, that one of the first things we have to cover when it comes to a godly wife is talk about the portrait of one. The portrait is what that godly woman looks like. And again, talking about the portrait, we won't cover that in detail on this episode, but think about that woman who would be your helpmeet. Think about the qualifications that she would have. Think about what desires she might have. Think about what she can do to help you do what God's called you to do. And then think about this. Where would that woman be found? See, the portrait is important that you keep in mind what you're looking for and who you're looking for. Because if you search for that person in a different place where she's probably not going to be, then your chances are a whole lot lower. See, if I was, just to make an analogy, if I was recruiting a baseball team, I'm not going to go to a basketball game trying to scout baseball players. That wouldn't make any sense, right? So when it comes to finding a godly wife, you've got to go to some godly places where godly women can be found. And then see, the portrait of the godly woman, though, it's important that we also remind ourselves, beauty can be vanity, all right? A godly wife isn't just pretty. She's prayerful, pure, and she's also pursuing Christ. Her value isn't in her figure. Her value is in her fear of God. Beauty might turn heads, but godliness builds homes. And really, that's what a wife is. That's what a helpmeet is. Proverbs 31:30 says, "Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised." So thinking about the portrait of a godly wife leads us into the next one, which would be the paradox. See, culture is going to be contrary to God's will every single time. Culture says date around when the Bible says be not equally yoked in 2 Corinthians 6:14. Culture says follow feelings, but Proverbs 3 says, lean not into thine own understanding, but in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Culture says look for beauty. Scripture says look for godliness. And if you adopt the world's habits, expect the world's heartbreak. If you want God's results, follow God's requirements. So if you're interested in the worldly women and people that don't really care about God, don't really follow the Bible, and aren't really into the same interests, then I really can't help you in that area. This podcast is specifically for those who are trying to find a godly woman, and we're going to talk about those godly places. But I think it was important to at least cover the portrait and the paradox, because if you're going to find a godly woman, you're going to have to let go of some places that she's not going to be. So if you spend all your time investing into women that are not godly and they're not in these godly places, then don't expect to have a godly wife. I mean, A plus B equals C, right? So when it comes to the places to look, think about this. If you want fruit, you're not going to look in the dumpster. You're going to a garden. And you don't go to the club to find a wife. You go to God's garden to find a virtuous woman. and a virtuous woman is praised. She is a godly wife. See, Psalm 1:3 says, she shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. And the one that's planted by the rivers of the water is the one who is spiritually strong, and she's the one who will know the Lord and will act godly. So when it comes to the places to look, the first one I want to talk about is the sanctuary, God's house. The by far most important, best place to find a godly wife is in the sanctuary. If she does not have an emphasis on the church, there's a good chance that she's not spirit-filled. See, if you want to find a godly wife that is spirit-filled, you're going to have to go to God's house where God's people are. Don't look just for a woman, though, who loves worship songs more than she loves the God of those songs. See, if you go there, you got to make sure, though, that she's there for the right reasons, because not everybody in church is there for the right reasons, but your chances of a godly wife being there are a lot higher. And also, marry a woman that you can meet at the altar, not on the algorithm. If you meet her at the altar, there's a much higher chance that she's a godly wife than one that you find on algorithm. See, the algorithm is going to try to promote those that are appealing to the flesh, those are trying to seek attention. And unless you want your wife to be someone who is out there for everybody on advertisement, then she's probably not a godly wife for you. But if you meet her at the altar, that means that she's making commitments, she's making decisions, she's seeking the Lord's face, and she has a relationship with God, and she's responding to the conviction through the message and the preaching, and that's the woman that you want to meet on the altar rather than the algorithm. Next, I want to talk about service. See, I mentioned before, if you're trying to find a godly wife and who's a helpmeet to you, there's some characteristics that you're going to have to look for and find. And then you're going to have to think about, well, where do I find those? See, Boaz didn't find Ruth doing anything else besides working in that field. Boaz, when he looked out on that field and he saw that Ruth was working, he saw that she was a servant. He saw that she was actually helpful. He saw potential in her. And finding her serving is much more valuable than finding her sitting. See, if you go to a godly place like God's house and you see a girl that's always sitting down, she's not doing anything, she's not helping anybody, she's not cleaning, she's not really doing much, she might not be godly. But if you're looking for a woman who is serving, somebody who can help you, somebody who will be there with you, who will guide your home, who will do the things that you need, and you guys can be productive together and efficient, look for a woman who is serving. See, when it comes to many things at church, it's a great place to find people who are serving and people who are not. Many people say that 20% of the people do 80% of the work, and I would find that to be true. So when you look at the people that are there, look for the ones that are serving. Anytime there's a church event going on, watch for the girls that actually want to help, the ones who are actually grabbing stuff and moving and asking what I can do. The ones that are sitting down and talking to each other and gossiping and whatever they might be doing besides working, those are not the ones that you want. You want to stay away from those because they're going to do the same thing in your home if you marry them. But if you look for the ones that are actually helping and actually serving and being productive, then you know that without accountability and you being there, they're going to be the same way with their character. So you have to find one that is serving. I think of the servant in Genesis 24 when he saw Rebekah coming to the well. And not only did she feed and give him drink, but she gave all 10 of his camels drink. I did the math on that. That was roughly about 80 trips to the well and back. But that told the servant that this woman was a servant. That told the servant that this woman could work hard. And he was looking for a wife for his master's son, Isaac. That master's son, Isaac, had a lot of responsibility. And because of that, he knew that this woman had the potential to fulfill the needs of that man. And if you're going to find a godly wife, you're going to have to find one that serves. That's important. Not only the sanctuary, not only in the service, but look at her spiritual circle. Look at who she's hanging around. You know, many say that your friends are who you will be or who you are. And if you look at that person and you want to find a godly wife, find her hanging out with godly people. Birds of a feather always flock together. So when you see a carnal or you see somebody who's backslidden, oftentimes they will find somebody else who's in that same state of mind, only so that they can justify and suffice their actions. But if you find a godly woman, you will find her with those who are godly. If you're going to find one in that position, you're going to have to find some people. So don't look for a godly woman who's hanging out with the people that sit in the back of the church, who are away from everybody, who are disconnected. The ones, as soon as the service leaves, she's gone and out the door. She doesn't want to fellowship with anybody. She doesn't want to hang around. She doesn't want to talk about the things of the Lord. Don't be looking for the ones that's unfaithful. They skip church. They miss out. Those are not the ones, but the ones who are there always, the ones who are there in that spiritual circle, right? Talking about in the middle of the flock, not on the outside of the flock where the wolves can get them, but in deadbeat in the center of the fire where God is working, God is moving. That is the woman that you want to find that is spiritual, in that spiritual circle. And not only that, but when it comes to looking for a godly woman, another place is in her standards. When I say the place that you need to look into, think about this. Who she is before you marry her is who she's going to be after you marry her. See, there's butterflies that comes and emotions that come that can persuade and kind of tug on our hearts somewhat. But when you look in those places that she has the standard set, then that's a conviction that she has. And because it's a conviction that she has, that's a conviction that she has between her and God. And because of that, you know that she walks with God and she knows God because she's holding those standards for her own self. She has virtue, she has integrity, she has character. So when it comes to the standards, look for a woman who has standards, and with those standards, she won't be in a place that compromises them. Be careful with those women that say they have standards, yet they compromise on them. They say that they have modesty, yet they hang out with all the people that don't have modesty standards. They say that they don't listen to that kind of music, but yet she's best friends with the people who listen to that kind of music. See, that's a double standard. You can't say one thing and then act another way. See, you want to look for those places that she has set in her life that are true and she's holding to, and not just saying it with her mouth, but with her heart, she's exemplifying it through her life. You see, when it comes to fishermen, you don't catch a salmon in a mud puddle. When it comes to trout, you don't catch them in polluted waters. And you always catch what swims where you cast. And you'll always catch the fish with what bait you put on that hook. So when it comes to a godly woman, if you're looking for one that has godly convictions and standards in her life that she knows between her and God, these covenants that she's made, you want to find one that doesn't compromise on them, and also find one that hasn't changed places on them. So think about the standards in her life before you influence her, before anything like that. Think about where she's at spiritually, because a place that you're going to find a godly wife is a place where she holds those standards, regardless of the influence around her, regardless of those who try to mock and scoff and downplay and throw water on her fire. If in those places she still holds true to those standards, that woman is a godly woman. The next thing off of that is we talked about some places to look, and we talked about the church. Find a great, good church that you can be a part of. If you're in a carnal, worldly church, it's going to attract carnal, worldly people. And that's not where you're going to find a godly wife. If you're in somewhere, you're not attending places where people are serving, you're not going to find the women that are serving. That's just a fact. And to be honest, if you're not there, then you're probably not even a servant, and there's some work that needs to be done on you too. And then after that, you want to find one who, also is in a spiritual circle, one that has godly influences and is not appealed to the friends and the drama and the gossip and the worldly culture, and also one that also holds her standards in her place no matter where she's at in life or environment, whether it's even going out into the secular world to the stores or jobs or anything like that. But let's then talk about, those are places to look for, but let's talk about some places to avoid. The first one is this. You're not going to find a godly wife in the club, and you're not going to find one at a concert. See, you can't build a holy home with someone who loves unholy environments. Those two do not fit. They're complete opposites. They're contrary one to the other. The world and God are on two opposite polar spectrums. They're not even in the same realm. So if you're going to find a Ruth, you're going to have to stop chasing Delilahs. See, these places, women fight to be seen, and that is not the type of godly wife that you want. You want one that is discreet, one that is chaste, one that is modest. But when you go to the club and concerts, you're going to find people that have 5 pounds of makeup on their face. They're revealing, they're appealing to their flesh, and they're trying to seek attention, not just from you men, but from all the men around them. See, if you want a godly wife, you want one that is for you, not one that is advertising herself for everyone else. And not just the clubs and the concerts, but you also don't want to find one that is just attracted to the culture. See, the world trains women to attract attention, but God trains women to attract favor with Him. And as long as you're holding hands with the world, you cannot hold hands with God. And if you find a woman that is more attracted to the culture and TikTok views and likes and trends, then that woman is not a godly woman. And you're not going to find that in those environments, those who appeal to the flesh, those who are following what the culture is doing. Because here's the thing, if TikTok has more influence over her life, then the Holy Spirit won't be able to do that work on her. So ask yourself this question: does TikTok or the Holy Spirit have more influence over her life? And you'll be able to see it in her actions and her profile. See, Ruth was found in the field. She wasn't found in the feed. Many women who try to follow the culture will be found in the feed, but Ruth is not interested in the algorithm. She's not interested in the feed. She's interested in the work of God, and that's where you're going to find a godly woman. Not only will you not find one in the clubs and concerts or the culture, but you also won't find one on the corner of strife. And I want to nail down this here right now. Proverbs 21:9 talks about it's better to dwell in a corner of the housetop than that woman who is rebellious and all that. But don't marry rebellion, okay? If she has a problem with authority, whether that be spiritual authority or those in her life, she is absolutely 100% going to have a problem with you, and you will not be able to contain or lead that woman. She will lead you. I promise you that. Don't dwell with her. Do not get with her. Do not look for her. Look, a godly woman is not going to be on the corner of strife. If you find a woman who's always mouthy, she's clamorous, she's talking out, she's speaking up, she's protesting, and you can see the rebellion in her against her parents, you can see the rebellion in her against spiritual authority, she is not a godly woman. You won't find her on the corner of strife. And that's also why you won't find one in the bar, because in the bar is exactly where these ungodly women are going to be who want to fight. They drink, they get intoxicated, their perception is changed and all that. But that is not where virtue dwells. The bar is where virtue dies. And that rebellion right there is going to seep into your marriage and for the rest of your life, whether it be raising kids, living at home, or anything like that. So do not look for a godly woman on the corner of strife, where there's quarrels, where there's disagreements, and she's always in the middle of it. She is not a godly woman, and she's not the one for you. The last one here, too, I want to talk about is a godly woman will not be found in a company of unbelievers. Okay? Missionary dating creates spiritual funerals. There's no such thing as missionary dating. If you see someone out there who's lost and in the world and you think that you're going to date them just to convert them, date to convert, that is completely messed up, and that's not what happens. Okay? God is not approval of that. He doesn't approve that. He doesn't bless that. Now, look, you should win them to the Christ and help them, give them the gospel. But when you have that mindset, God knows your thoughts. He knows your intentions. He knows your motives if you're just trying to get with that person. And honestly, if you're trying to get with that person, then the whole rest of this podcast doesn't really even apply to you because your heart's not in the right places. You're not seeking those things. You're seeking pleasures, not a family and a godly spouse. So do not go looking for a godly wife at places that ungodly people gather. And there's a host of places that ungodly people gather. You're not going to find one at the festivals. You're not going to find one at the movies. You're not going to find one where there's drinking and alcohol and drugs and parties. That's not where you're going to find a godly woman, where lost people are doing lost people things, where worldly people are doing carnal things. That is not where you're going to find a godly woman. So if you run into her and you're backsliding, you're at one of those places, don't think that God is blessing you because you found this woman. That's not how God operates. If you're going to find that godly woman, she's going to be in the place that godly women dwell, not in a company of unbelievers. And the Bible is very clear with that in many verses, but Ephesians 5:11 says, "Have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness." Okay? So the next one too after that I want to talk about is well, let me give you this illustration real quick. A hotel room gives temporary comfort, and a home gives a long-term covenant. And many people date like it's a hotel room. See, it's temporary. It's only for a little season. But when it comes to building a home and a family and a godly house, you got to look at the long term, not just the short term. Not pleasure for a night, but with no plans, no peace, no permanence. But you got to look at your investment in the long term. And see, godly wives build homes, not just highlight reels. Proverbs 14:1 says, "Every wise woman buildeth her house." And after that, let's talk about just a couple of the proofs. There's some Bible examples that shows us clearly what some godly women look like. And you can study these out for yourself. We don't have time to expound them. But as mentioned before, we talked about Isaac finding Rebekah. And see, the servant is the one who prayed for a godly woman, prayed for God to give her that direction. And he found Rebekah serving. She came to the well, she fed his camel, she fed him, or gave him drink, gave her camels drink. And they did things right. Genesis 24, I've been in that passage for a while. There's some great truths in there about courting and dating. But yeah, Isaac didn't go chase women. He prayed and God brought him one. Rebekah also didn't flirt her way into marriage. She served her way into marriage. Not only Rebekah is a great example, but Boaz finding Ruth working in the fields, gleaning. She was in the fields working hard, and yes, he was attracted to her, but it was more than just the attraction from seeing her that was appealing. It was seeing her servant's attitude. It was seeing her submissiveness. And because of that, he wanted to bless her and take her as his wife. And also Proverbs 31, the woman that fears the Lord and is very skilled in many different ways, but she is a woman that fears the Lord above all. Because if she doesn't fear God, then why would she have any reason to follow biblical examples and biblical guidelines that God gives us? Find a woman that fears God. She will more than likely be a godly woman. God rewards obedience, not aimlessness. So if you want to find one, you've got to find one that is intentional in these areas. And not just the proofs, but let's also talk about the practice, okay? Stop scrolling for beauty. Start searching for godliness. I think I've emphasized quite a few times on this episode. Don't try to find a godly wife on social media. Okay, if she has a viral video or picture, anything like that, there's a good chance that she's not the one for you because she's trying to go viral. She's trying to advertise whatever she has, and that's not the one. So it's important that you search for godliness, not just someone who is appealing to the eyes. And there's a few things you can do also, as we mentioned before, to find these godly women in godly places. Join a Bible-believing church. Okay, if you're in a place that is not a Bible-believing church and is loose on so many things, low standards and all that, chances are you're slim to find a godly wife there. If you go to a church where the Bible is preached clearly, the leadership has a high standard, and they're applying and practicing all the spiritual principles in their life, you probably have a higher chance of finding a godly wife there. Also, serve consistently. When you serve in your church, when you serve in these areas, you're going to find other people who serve. And that's where you're going to find a godly wife. The ones who are helping, the ones who are doing more above and beyond what they're asked to do, the ones who are seeking to serve, because you want her to be able to serve your family. You want her to help you build a home. You don't want a lazy bum wife who sits on the couch and 10 years down the road, she's gained 150 pounds because she hasn't done anything or cleaned the house or cooked food. That's not a godly wife. You want to find a wife who is serving and active in the ministry. Not only that, but attend godly gatherings. There's many youth meetings. There's many of meetings that people have. Visit other churches that have, great standards in your area, good churches you know of. Go where godly people gather, not where ungodly people and lost people gather. And also build godly friendships. Get to know people that have the same, motives and intentions and principles as you do. That's what happened in my life. I ran across somebody who, supported the same stuff I supported, was fighting against the same evil and wickedness that we were fighting against. And because of that, I ended up finding my wife. So build relationship with godly people. And you should do that even regardless of trying to find a wife or not. That's an important thing is fellowship and iron sharpening iron. So stop searching with your eyes for a wife and start searching the Bible for a wife. Be where God's daughters are, doing what God's daughters do. And the final thing is this. Think about the pledge. When it comes to marriage, you are pledging your life. Till death do you part. What God hath made together, let no man put asunder. Okay, if God has joined it, this is a pledge. You're not just choosing a wife, you're choosing a mother for your children. You're choosing your future. She will 100% alter your future, either for the better or for the worse. So don't hunt like the world if you want a home built on the word. Men, don't just pray for a godly wife. Live in such a way that a godly wife is praying for you. And if you want a Ruth, then you can't act like a Moabite. You've got to act like a Boaz. So I hope and pray that this episode was a help to you, talking about the places to find a godly wife. I think we made it very clear that a godly wife is found in godly places. And the chances of you finding a godly wife in these places where lost people and worldly and secular and carnal and wickedness happens, there's a really good chance you're not going to find her. And I would highly encourage you, don't try to seek one who falls into the algorithm and the highlights, because if you're looking at her, there's a lot of other guys looking at her too. And she's probably seeking that attention. Not all the time, but there's a very good chance that she is. So you just want to be careful with that she doesn't have the wrong intentions, the wrong motives, but the same can be said for those in church. But I will say this, if you're trying to find a wife who's going to help you build a home, you're going to have to find one who's already working on building herself to build a home. Before you guys even enter in a relationship, it's important that you find her already doing that same thing, because that's who she's going to be, and she's not going to change from that. So I pray and hope that this episode was a help to you, and we'll continue to keep this series going. We'll see what God has for us next time. Please like, share, subscribe, follow us on Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So God bless you guys. We'll see you next time.